Hello and welcome. Well, did you know that it's common for approximately 40% of first-time mums not to be intimate a great deal after their baby is born? Interesting stat, huh? Well, the good news is that this is just a phase and a stage that so many relationships go through. Another question for you. Now, did you know that more marriages break up in the first 18 months after childbirth than any other time? And although that there are no surveys at all, it is safe to assume that the intimacy or the lack of it is a major contributing factor. And that's why it is so important to understand what is happening and to have an honest and open conversation about it. And that's what we're here to do today with our special guest, Debbie Rivers. Now, Debbie will be sharing insights to help all new parents help keep your relationship strong and make better relationship choices towards consideration, compassion, and empathy. Now, just a little bit about our guest. Debbie is an internationally accredited relationship expert who works with singles and couples, and her passion is in enabling parents and people to create and maintain healthy relationships. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
This is really, really interesting and insightful conversation to be having. And before we sort of get stuck into all the details, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had published your article, and the title is Sex After Childbirth. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about and what inspired you to write it?
Look, I think that, we live in a world of Facebook and Instagram where we see everyone's life is perfect. People have a baby and they go back to childbirth weight and sex life and everything is great. But the reality for a lot of couples is that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
You think that you're going to have this, everything's going to go back to normal. And no one really warns you what having a baby is like. I don't even think you realize what tiredness is until you have one. And sex is this thing. So in the article, I talk about, some of the things that can go wrong and how you can avoid those going wrong in your relationship. Because sex is this really small part of a relationship. When it's good, everything's good. And when it's bad, everything's bad. So kind of knowing how to navigate that at a time where, childbirth changes your life more than any other event, doesn't it? So kind of knowing what to expect and having some of those conversations, maybe to prevent the problems. Like you read that biggest amount of marriages fail after 18 months, and 40% of people aren't having much sex in the first year after childbirth. When people understand that that's what's happening for other people, they don't feel like there's something wrong with them or they're alone. And it can save the damage to the relationship. And, having a great relationship impacts your kids and every area of your life. So, my passion is to help people avoid those problems.
Yeah, we're really grateful for your help today as well with this chat. Now, to begin with, I'd love to know from your perspective, what impact do you think childbirth actually has on couples and relationships? And what have you experienced, I guess, with all of the couples that you've worked with over the years?
Yeah. Yeah, look, for one, the woman's body changes, so she's not feeling sexy how she would before.
Mm-hmm.
The guy often feels shut out because he might have been the center of her life, and all of a sudden she's caring for this other whole human becoming,
Of
right?
course.
So
Yes. Yep.
the relationship changes a lot, and a lot of self-esteem issues come in at that point. And I think when couples don't talk about this stuff, that's when the problems can come up.
Mm-hmm.
So you know guys, it's really weird. Guys feel love through sex, and when it dries up after childbirth, they don't understand. They don't logically understand what's happening. So being able to have some of those honest conversations will prevent those problems.
Mm-hmm. So in your experience, what have you found, I guess, some of the more common challenges that couples experience?
Well, basically the lack of sex. So when they're not having sex, the guy's not feeling loved.
Yep.
They're feeling, the woman's feeling overwhelmingly exhausted. So she's not feeling particularly loved, getting caught up in this baby. And I think knowing too, right? So when you have a baby, you produce, especially for breastfeeding, prolactin, which suppresses your sex drive and your libido altogether.
Yep.
And it's nature's way of stopping getting pregnant again. And it's also, to ensure the health of that baby. So it
Yeah,
is nature's way
absolutely.
of doing that. And it's really normal. So if you know it's a normal thing and to
Mhm.
expect it, and you can have some of those honest conversations around it, you can prevent the man feeling rejected, the woman not feeling loved. Because one of the biggest problems is for women, it feels like sex is another thing to do at the end of the day. And because
Yes.
the hormone levels are so down, she's got no drive to have sex. So she's starting to feel like there's something wrong with her. Whereas if you realize that it's nature's whole way of, you know, ensuring the survival of the human race, it has a different perspective. And I think that if you can be affectionate and kind and loving to one another, even if you're not being intimate and having sex, that can have, it
Profound
can save a
effects
lot of,
on the
yeah,
relationship.
save
Absolutely.
those problems. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the article, you list some of the reasons for the lack of intimacy with new parents, which I'd love to just really briefly sort of talk through with you now. And the first
Mm,
one you mentioned is feeling overwhelmed that they are responsible for a whole new human being, which you mentioned
yeah.
earlier. Also, that sex feels like another responsibility that you just don't have time for, which you also
Yeah.
just mentioned. Of course, the fear about sort of falling pregnant again, which you mentioned that I guess human nature has a way of ensuring that doesn't happen by
But not always, right?
yeah. And there could be issues from the birth, including being stitched and or just it actually sort of being painful and it's not feeling the same. And finally, that there's the fact that breastfeeding, as you just mentioned, lowers a woman's sex drive because she's producing, is it prolactin? Is that how you
Yeah.
pronounce it? Prolactin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So
That
I
be
think I think if you know those things, it kind of ahead of time, so you don't feel like there's something wrong with you, because we are surrounded with Instagram, right? Perfect mothers with babies that are back to pre-body weight, and you feel like, this isn't normal. And I think particularly for the men, they don't talk about it like women do.
no.
So when they're not getting sex, they feel so alone and so unloved, and their life has just changed. So if you can't find a way to talk about that, you can't navigate it. And look, there's some studies where they've found that couples who talk about sex frequently and often have more sex and more orgasms than those that don't. So being able to even, I think for the woman, I remember when I had two kids within 16 months, and I remember being exhausted, and I would hate my husband even to hug me at that time, because I felt like a hug would mean that, that I was going to have to do something that I was too tired for.
Yeah,
But I think if there's a lot of touching and affection without any expectation, that also changes it. If,
absolutely. And I wanted to ask also,
yeah.
have you found that after seeing the birth of a baby that it can leave some men sort of feeling weird about being intimate in general as well?
Yes, yes. because they don't want to see that coming out of there. Like, it
Yes.
changes their whole view of it. So yeah, for some
I've
men
heard the
that's,
saying that
yeah.
some men feel like it's like seeing their favorite pub burn down or something like that.
Well, that's very true. So maybe just stand at the opposite end. I don't know.
So I mean, what's been your experience with how sort of men and fathers generally feel about that then, and being intimate
Well,
after seeing the birth of a baby?
and it's funny, for some it's a big deal. For others, they just go, "Oh my God, that's a miracle that we've created a whole other life." So they're able to, as men can be very good at, put it in a box and forget about it. So I suppose for those that have seen it, I would get them not to focus on that so much, because if you focus on it and focus on it,
Don't think
it
about it so much.
yeah.
And then getting back to tiredness, which you were just speaking about before, I mean, how can couples stop tiredness, I guess, affecting, their ability to be able to be intimate?
Well, I think being able to talk about household chores. There was another study that says couples who share housework are more likely to stay married. So it's very sexy for the guy to help with the housework. And he's going to get more sex in the end because he's being supportive and helpful. So I also believe that communication is the key around anything. Don't leave these things to chance. Really talk about the household chores, what you're going to do, because there is the assumption, right, that you've had a baby and you've got more time. But the reality is, especially if you're breastfeeding, you can feel like you're continually feeding a baby and you've got no time for anything. So being able to understand that and not think that she can do everything because she's got this much time, because it doesn't work that way, does it?
Of course. And, overall, and you mentioned earlier, the birth of a baby is that transformational experience for
Yeah,
both parents. But obviously for a mum, it's more of from a physical perspective, and it can leave a lot of women feeling
yeah,
different about themselves. That being that they don't necessarily feel sexy, that they may, have them feeling like a
yeah.
mother more than a partner. So I just wanted to know, from your perspective, how can women best overcome, I guess, feeling like this then?
Look, I think they need to be able to have some time for them. So they're not just with the baby all the time. And again, the guy can do a lot to make his partner feel sexy by those shows of affection without it going anywhere. So I would say don't lose yourself when you have the baby. Have some time to allow yourself the time to feel good. Know that it'll pass too. Like that first year, especially your first baby, everything changes more than anything else. So be kind and patient with yourself, that you don't have to measure up to anyone else and you don't have to be a certain way. The sexy will come back, those hormone levels, because the hormone levels suppress how you feel about yourself too. So just being kind to yourself will allow, and give yourself time. Don't expect that you have to be the superwoman, that it's got to be back to how it was before normal. And I feel like a lot of women have this perfectionism thing, that we have to have the perfect life. We have to be doing it all. And you absolutely don't. You
Yeah.
can ask for help. The house can be messier. And maybe if the partner can understand that and not seek perfection,
Open
so
communication. Yeah.
yeah, it solves so much. And in all of these things, kindness is the new black. Be kind to each other.
I love that.
If the guy comes home, don't expect the house to be perfect. And for the woman, don't criticize everything he does, because he won't do it anymore.
That's their sort of get out of jail card, isn't it?
It
Oh, you
is,
told me I
it is.
can't do it, so I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to watch TV. Put
And look,
Netflix on.
I don't know about you, I've played that card too.
As
I've
well.
ironed shirts badly, so they had to do them. So they didn't ask me to do it again.
I love that. Now, in general terms, I'd love to know from your perspective, why do you think, and you address expectations a lot in the article, so
Yeah.
why do you think that expectations really are the root of all heartache then between couples and in relationships in
Well,
this
yeah,
case?
look, I think in anything. So say if you go to a movie, right? A hyped up movie where you're expecting everything from it, you're let down and disappointed. Whereas you go to see the movie that you have no interest in and it's a great experience, the more you expect without that open communication, the more you're going to be disappointed. So I think around the baby, we expect to feel a certain way. And often the reality doesn't match what we feel in our head.
Mm-hmm.
So keeping it real. And again, it comes back to, if you can talk about how you're feeling and what matters to both of you, you can save yourself a whole deal of heartache. Because I think, especially women too, we speak hint, we don't speak direct. We don't ask for what we want and what we need in a way that men can hear it. So we kind of will speak and assume that he'll know what we meant because another woman would, but guys don't. So be clear and be direct and get rid of the expectations, because you save being disappointed. Because
Yes.
people don't know what we're thinking, and often we project what we think and feel onto them. They have no idea. So being clear and letting go of that expectations is everything in every area of your life, really.
So it's not realistic to expect that your body will magically, return back to pre-body shape
Oh
easily,
God,
like
no.
all of those 20, the younger sort of girls on Instagram as well, and that maybe that your
Yeah.
baby will definitely sleep throughout the night. It's unrealistic for us to think this when even as
Hmm.
adults, we don't necessarily sleep throughout the night ourselves.
Exactly.
Babies can't self-soothe themselves.
Yeah.
So it's something that we've obviously learned throughout our lives as we wake up in
Yeah.
the middle of the night that we go back to sleep. But for a
Yeah.
newborn, I mean, they can't self-soothe.
No.
So unrealistic to think that they're going to sleep right throughout the night, and then of
Yeah.
course that that your sex life will return back to normal. So
Yeah.
there's all of these things may be true for some mothers, but not all. But I think
Yeah.
it's great advice that we really should let go of expectations and just be kind to ourselves, as you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
on as
I
well,
mean,
which is great advice. Mm,
kindness is really the new black. Like,
love this
and
scene.
yeah, and those expectations, it passes. It's a time in your life, and don't compare yourself with anyone else.
Great
For women,
advice.
women, get a support group of other women around you. It does make it easier because you know that you're not alone, and you know that you can see their experiences and go, well, no one except those 20 something Insta models are perfect after a baby.
Yes,
No, be kind to
absolutely.
yourself, be kind to each other. And you know what? We remember how people feel rather than how they make us look. So in a relationship, when you're kind and you're nice to each other, that stuff means so much more than whether your body is perfect, because people don't notice that.
Absolutely. And you've been mentioning about the communication and having those open and honest conversations. So I wanted to know from your perspective, why is it so important to have open and honest conversations with your partner, just generally about how you're feeling?
Because they don't know. We assume that the people who know us best will continue to know us, but the fact is they don't. We think people think how we do, and we project those thoughts onto them. So unless we really talk about it, they don't know what we're thinking. They don't know what we're feeling, and without the
Of
ability to
course.
be able to do that, a relationship is based on that. And when you first meet and you're in love, and it's so magical because you're so interested in each other and you want to find out and talk about everything. As it goes on, we assume we know everything, and we
Yeah.
don't. I talk to some older couples and I'm like, they're happily married for 30 years. They still don't know everything about each other. So you can always discover new things and
Love that.
yeah. It's funny, I ask couples if they know what each other's favourite chocolate bar is, and most of them have no idea.
My partner's all of them. I can put anything. We can't keep
That's
chocolate in this
easy.
house because it just evaporates, apparently. I hear what you're saying. Actually, I was doing some research for another podcast a few weeks ago, and I came across just this list that you would ask on your first date. And it's
Yeah,
really interesting that there's so many of these open-ended questions that we wouldn't even necessarily know to ask our partner that we've been with for so many years.
exactly.
So,
Exactly.
that's a really great opportunity for any couple, irrespective of how long
Yeah.
you've been together. Just Google, great sort of questions to ask on a first date. And I've started asking Steve a few of them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see their perspective because you assume, as you said about your partner,
Yeah.
but you don't necessarily,
You don't.
know everything, but
Have you
from,
looked up the 34 questions to fall in love? That was
no,
done by a psychologist. And if you ask again in a relationship, because you fail to know all of that stuff, even to see how much you know, it's fascinating.
yeah, it's just, as you said, we make the assumption that we know these things about our
Yeah.
partners, but you don't necessarily, which is great. And I think men overall, from an emotional perspective, mean they can be empathetic. Really,
Yeah.
it's unfair for us to expect that they can completely understand the physical and mental changes that a woman's
Oh,
body goes through. I mean, you can't
they
assume that they're going to understand what
no, they're
we go
never
through.
gonna. I mean, they're not at all,
So,
because
and
it's such a big thing, right?
absolutely, but they're built obviously completely physically different as well. So you can't assume that they understand what we're feeling overall.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where being able to talk about. I recommend this book for couples. It's 8 Dates by the Gottmans.
Yes.
So Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. So
It's
who's
actually
the author?
John and Julie Gottman. They studied couples and their relationships for 40 years, and they can predict which couples will work and which won't with 94% accuracy.
Okay, and anything you
Comes
can
down
expand
to,
further this?
yeah,
Yeah.
look, it comes down to 4 communication styles. So they talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So if you have criticism, blame, contempt, or stonewalling, they're bad signs in your relationship. So, not accepting blame when someone tells you you're doing something wrong, or treating someone with contempt, or not hearing them, are not good signs. So being able to communicate. And they wrote the book, The 8 Dates, and they're for people that are in relationships. And they've set out 8 specific dates that you go on. And they've given you questions to ask each other. And it's around the big things, like there's one whole section on sex. And you go and you talk about it in a really honest and open way, in a way most couples never do.
So what's
And there's around money and dreams. So they've got 8 specific areas that couples struggle in, and you just go, say, once a month and do one of these dates, and it's an amazing
fantastic?
experience
So
to
what's
do.
the name of the book again? Sorry, Deb. Can you hold
Okay,
that up?
it's the 8 Dates
The Eight
by
Dates by
John
John
Gottman.
Gottman. The Eight
Yeah,
Dates by John
highly
Gottman.
recommend it. Yeah,
Awesome. Great tip. And you've also mentioned that unless, I guess, couples have an open heart to heart and are willing to speak openly about their feelings, that they're most likely to have no idea, as we're just saying, about how the other person's
yeah,
feeling in
yeah,
general. And that men communicate differently to women as well, which
very
you
much.
alluded to at the start of what we're saying. So, I mean, what tips can you give to other women to communicate, I guess, sort of best with their partner in a way that
Yeah,
they would be open to, I guess, and
yeah. Look,
understand?
what women tend to do is they do fall into this criticizing or making the guy feel wrong.
Hmm.
So when you talk, it should be about how you feel and not blame statements. So I usually teach people how to use I statements rather than you. So to give you an example, it would, if you used a you statement, uh, I'm really unhappy. You're always on the phone. You make me feel like crap all the time. Or, I feel sad when you're distracted by your phone. So saying I feel sad is about you, and it's not directing the blame on the other person. So
Hmm.
if you talk about I feel rather than you always, or you never, or you,
Okay,
yeah,
so in saying the word you're passing the blame on to your partner,
blame,
but when you say
yeah.
I'm feeling this, it flips it a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. And it should really be like not a judgment. Say if you were looking forward to spending time and the person didn't come home, I felt really disappointed. I was so looking forward to seeing you. Whereas if you go, well, you always let me down, you're useless, it feels really different. You're saying the same thing, and it's
Yes.
often not what you say, it's how you say it.
100%. And even just I could feel the difference in your
Tone of
energy,
voice.
the tone, and just the way that you said those 2 phrases. It's really quite powerful. Um,
Yeah.
and I wanted to ask, in your experience also, what changes have you found that men go through after the birth of a baby? On their end, we're speaking a lot about what women go through with their physical changes, the emotional, the hormonal. But
Mhm.
what have you found that men go through, and how can women best recognize what's actually going on for them?
Yeah. Okay, so for men, before it would say, especially with the first baby, it's the 2 of you, they're the center of your world. All of a sudden, men can feel shut out when a baby's born. They can feel like they're not needed, they're not wanted, they're not valued, which is particularly hard because how do
Mm.
they talk about that when they do see that their wife is exhausted and tired and dealing with this change? So they feel displaced, but they don't really have a voice to be able to talk about it. So, like I said before, a lot of men feel like they're not loved anymore. They're not needed. Their use is ended. And like I said, for men see sex as being loved,
Yeah.
and the lack of sex. And if it just dries up, if they've had this wonderful sex life and then there's nothing, they feel unloved, as well as their whole world's changed. you know what I mean? There's no more going out like they used to. Their wife's tired. They're getting sleepless nights. And I think because they don't have an outlet to be able to express some of this stuff, for many of them, they just say it's really tough. They
Yes.
just, it doesn't feel great. And because the woman's going through all of these changes, no one really thinks about what the guy's going through either.
Of course. And that would be sort of quite natural because, I guess the focus is on the health and
Yeah,
well-being of the newborn,
yeah,
and also any other changes that she's going through and possibly just not feeling like herself also.
yeah,
But, generally most men after witnessing the birth of the baby generally experience and feel a deeper love for their partner and
yeah.
in awe of what the woman's body has gone through and what she's been able to
Hmm.
achieve. But I think as you keep mentioning, the communication is extremely crucial for that for the
Yeah,
relationship to thrive. But
yeah,
also, speaking now about the mum again, I guess the maternal and emotional bond between mother and child develops from the womb and strengthens as
yeah.
she's, in almost in all cases, I guess the primary caregiver. And this
Mm.
understandably can make some dads feel left out as well.
Yes, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, and you mentioned that earlier on that men aren't always necessarily prepared for this. So, how can mothers help prevent this from happening overall?
Well, I think include the guy. Don't shut him out. Understand, because when you're planning for that baby, you're doing it all together. You go out and buy the cot, the pram. You're talking about it, and all of a sudden, he can feel shut out. So the more you bring him into that and allow him, to look after the baby without having to do it perfectly, and then it doesn't feel so shut out. Like it's
Yeah.
something that you're doing together, and it's something that's important that you're doing together. And again, it comes down to communication and including them, and talking about how it feels a little bit rather than assuming you know how each other feels,
Yes. And
because it is one of the biggest transitions you're going to go through.
undoubtedly, undoubtedly. And do you have any other advice to help mums keep the connection equally strong with the father to help prevent, I guess, any longer lasting issues from developing?
Yeah,
Or does
yeah.
it just keep going back to communication again? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the research that the Gottmans did around babies, they said that the relationships that thrived were the couples that weren't. Sometimes the relationship can be child-centered rather than couple, like a family. So
Yes,
it it
yes.
it should be. Don't just put all the attention on the child and your to-do lists and outcome focus. Build that rich attention, affection, intimacy that doesn't have to be in the bedroom, if that makes sense, because that's what builds a healthy relationship. And children want to grow up seeing that in their parents, which gives them the best possible chance in the future of healthy relationships. So instead of being so focused on that child, be focused on each other as well, because
Yeah.
that will make a strong relationship
Yeah, and
that
you've
lasts.
mentioned that men, need some form of demonstration of love, and it doesn't always have to be about intimacy. It can be a touch,
Yeah,
it could be a hug, a kiss, even just a simple sign of affection. And you can still just, flirt and those types of things as well. I mean,
yeah,
it
yeah,
is nothing better than a child seeing, as you said, the demonstration of what a relationship is of their parents being in love, and being
exactly.
affectionate as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, wear some rose colored glasses rather than criticizing each other. And I think some of the research said every time you walk past your partner, just touch them or give them a kiss or say you love them. And couples that do that often have the most healthy relationships. So, it really is the small things that matter. And
And
we overlook them, right?
100% we do. And I
Yeah.
found it really interesting. I just had a thought, going back to what you're saying about the polls and the research as well. You do reference them both of them in the article.
Mhm.
But you've mentioned that sharing household chores was the top three highest ranking
Yeah.
issues
Yeah.
associated with stressful, sorry, not stressful, but the opposite, Rach, sorry, but a
Yeah.
successful marriage.
Yeah.
And overall, I guess the most common arguments were about housework. So this is
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
is a very big focal point for relationships. Can you maybe
Very
just
big.
expand on this a little bit more?
Okay, so the research, I'm just quickly referring to it.
Yeah. So you've
Yeah,
got the Pew Research poll in 2007
yeah.
sharing household chores was in the top 3 highest ranking issues associated with a successful marriage,
Yeah,
third only to faithfulness and really great intimacy.
which is huge, right? So again, that working out who will do what and how that's going to look, and if you can't work it out, go get a cleaner. It's probably the best money that you'll ever spend, and it'll save your marriage. So I sometimes think we get hung up in having to do it all, having to be everything, but
Just be more
it can be a
outcome
simple
focused.
solution, right?
Yeah.
Just get a cleaner for 2 hours a week. It can save your marriage. It can be that simple. And again, I think it's that perfectionism. A lot of women are their own worst enemies. So they'll want a guy to help. And like I said, they'll criticize him for doing it. And then he doesn't do it anymore because anything he does isn't good enough. So being able to, I don't know, women don't like this, right? Because we do everything without any reward. But sometimes appreciating when a guy does something will make him want to do it again. I find, right? I find a lot of women might whinge at guys going, I want you to put garbage out, I want you to put the garbage out, or pick up the dog poo, or whatever it is. Then when he does it, he comes in all proud and goes, I did that for you. And she doesn't even notice. He goes, well, what's the point, right? So men love appreciation, and they love it when you notice what they do.
Yeah.
Women don't. I mean, we like it, but we just, I don't know. We just get on with it, right? But when you've asked a guy to do something, appreciate what he does. He'll
Yes.
do more of it because that feels good for him.
Yeah.
And I know that as women, we get stubborn and go, why the hell should we have to thank them for what should be what they're doing anyway? Yet the fact of it is, it'll make them do it more. And sometimes when you're complaining about the rubbish not being put out, there's a bigger underlying issue that's going on that you're angry about, that you probably need to resolve.
Good point.
That you're probably feeling like your needs aren't being met and you're not being heard. But that again comes back to being clear and not speaking hint all the time, and
Yes.
definitely appreciating what he does, because it
100%.
will make a difference. And a bit like, no, I can't say that. I was thinking about how when you have pets, you reward them, don't you? And then
Yes, you do. Yeah,
they get into the
absolutely.
habit of doing something. So not
Now,
suggesting it's the same.
now, I just wanted to go back to what you're saying about kindness. Lastly, you've shared some really
Yeah.
helpful tips about the need for kindness in a relationship. And you've mentioned some phrases, which I love, that kindness is the new black, and kindness is the super glue of love, which I think
Yeah.
is very true. And I think it's a very powerful statement also. So can you maybe just expand a little bit more on this for us at the moment?
Yeah, look, I saw some research recently too that out of 64,000 women,
Mm-hmm.
the 5 top things that they wanted in a man and they found attractive,
Yeah,
the number one thing was kindness. 90% of women want kindness from a man.
that's
And
incredible. 90%.
90%, and they did it over 180 countries. So it's huge.
Oh
So it's
gosh,
all
how many
about,
people would have been in that survey then overall?
yeah,
Gosh.
it was huge. And one of the biggest ones that they've done about what women want. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not about looks, it's not about muscles. We want the guy that's kind.
Yes.
So when you infuse kindness, you
Yeah.
know, sorry, turn that off. Kindness is that
Yeah.
you're not judging, you're not criticizing the person. And
Yeah.
look, the one place you could wear rose-colored glasses is when you see your partner. Try
Yes.
to always see the best in them. Try not to continually focus on their bad points or criticize them to anyone. See the good. Be kind to them and you get kindness back. So I
Yes.
think instead of choosing judgment or harsh words, choose to be kind.
Yes. So if we find ourselves getting angry or wanting to blame or show contempt, have to manage ourselves better.
Well, I think so. And I think sometimes that comes down to the expectation. He's not doing this again. He didn't know he had to do that.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? As women, we
Yes.
go, oh, well, we'd automatically go pick up all the toys and we would, go put the washing on. And he
Huh?
doesn't think to do that. So understanding that he's not you
Yes.
will help that. And I think about being clear. If you have, I mean, I know that in one area I've never had an issue is with household chores, because I've always gone, okay, what do you want to do? What can I do? And we split it, and it's never an issue. Whereas a
Yes.
lot of people don't talk about it, don't work out, well, you know, it really matters if you can do this. Could you help me with this? They're
Yes.
not clear and direct, but they're also not understanding the other person. So maybe for the man that's gone out, maybe he's had a sleepless night with you and he's had an awful day at work. Maybe he does want to just come and sit down for half an hour and regroup, understand what the other person needs, which is also kindness.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think by seeing it differently,
Have some
it,
consideration for the other person. It's very
yeah,
important.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I look at relationships and go, it would be so easy if we did what the other person wanted and they did what we wanted, there'd be no issues. So listen, but you know, if you listen to what really matters to them,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a very simple formula that we probably just overlook all the time, and we're all about ourselves and
yeah,
what we want, as opposed to flipping it and actually saying, well, what do they want? And it's going to make them happy. And if they're
yeah.
going to do what I want, we're going to equally be happy. So there's just going to be this harmony.
Rather than
Why
people
can't
get
it
caught
be
up
this
in,
easy? So,
well, it could be, because it is when you first meet, right?
well,
Because
it
you're so
is.
happy, right? But I
Because you're
think
all
we
about them and you're all about their needs and what they're interested in, making them
and they're all
happy.
about yours. So if you kind of continue to do that, continue to, I think the research says that there needs to be a ratio of 5 to 1 in a relationship,
Hmm.
5 positive interactions from 1 negative. So anytime you say something awful, say 5 good things, but have that thing in your mind, because it makes a huge difference and you
Yeah.
save yourself so much damage. And I think as women too, we tend to hold on to things. Like, you know, the guy says he's sorry for something, but we don't let it go there and then, do we? Because, you know, he's probably going to do it again, or it's going to do this. So when they do what we want, we don't always notice. We don't always accept sorry, and we kind of keep it against them. So they feel like they've got nowhere to go to. And it works the other way. It works both ways. It's not just
Absolutely.
women doing, men, you know, do the same thing to vice versa. So I think it's kind of that reciprocal that you both end up doing.
I like that 5 to 1 ratio, and
Yeah.
it's a question for ourselves. You know, when's the last time you said something nice to your partner, and complimented them or thanked them, or in that
Mm,
respect gave them some positive energy and light and love. And what is that ratio? Is it 5 to 1? Is it flipped?
yeah.
Maybe it's the other way around. So
Well, you know, you've got to think about it, your relationship bank account, right? Why there's more money in it, you're fine, and you can override those bad times. When you're taking more withdrawals than there's anything in, that's when relationships fail.
yes. That's a really great way to think of it. So just keep making those sort of positive, like affirmations, those
Yeah,
compliments or whatever it is, and just work to that minimum 5 to 1 ratio. And a lot
yeah.
of the time we'll just iron out a lot of those problems. And let's face it, a lot of the time guys are
Mhm.
doing stuff that they don't even realize they're doing it wrong, and we just
No,
sort
they
of,
don't.
and we're the ones that lose it over it. So they're like, what did I even do? What did I say? So
Yep, yep.
now, you've shared
So true.
some fantastic strategies today how couples can best spend time, and I guess just focus positive attention towards their relationship. If you were to
Yeah.
summarize, I guess, your key messages for anyone watching and listening, Deb, what would they be?
Okay, look, number one, let go of expectations and the need for perfection.
Yes.
Really share the household chores. Like, if you want a better sex life, share the household chores. I really think that being able to say, you know, small acts of affection, being able to say you love you often helps a relationship. Infuse kindness into everything, and know that this is a stage. Knowing that having a new baby is a stage. It's normal to feel tired. It's normal to feel overwhelmed. Be kind to yourself as well. And I think if it starts with us, if we can be kind to ourselves, and we're often our own worst critics, right?
Yeah.
So if we start there and then be kind, it changes everything.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. Now, if couples have got any questions for you and or they would like to reach out to you after this interview today, whereabouts can they find you?
They can find me, website is debbierivers.com.au. So pretty simple.
Awesome. And we'll have that link in the show notes. Deb, I really loved the chat today and really hope for the opportunity to have another chat and a
Yeah, thank
discussion
you.
in the not too distant future. Until then, stay safe and speak to you soon. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.